Remember old drag boats tearing down straightaways, or ever seen an old Glastron that looks more like a vintage car? Or what about this mind-blower? In the 1980s, there was a small production boat with a hull so advanced for its time that it could top 100 miles per hour, with nothing more than a factory-rigged outboard. These weren't concept boats, they were real production models. Most boaters today have never even seen them. And the reason these old boat styles disappeared is almost as wild as the speed they achieved. Let's dive deep into these 10 boat styles. If you've ever seen a Glastron Sea Flight from the late 50s or early 60s, you'll know exactly what I mean when I say this boat could win a car show while still in the water. Back then, America was drunk on the jet age. Cars had tailfins big enough to pick up AM radio from Mars, and boat designers thought, hey, why not? The Sea Flight took fiberglass, a brand new miracle material at the time, and bent it into a two-tone wraparound windshield, tail-finned rocket for the lake. The decks looked like they'd been stolen from a '59 Cadillac, and the chrome trim could blind a pelican on a sunny day. These weren't just showpieces either. In 1957, a Glastron Sea Flight made a 1,900-mile stunt run from Houston to New York to prove the brand's durability. The press loved it, the public wanted it, and suddenly every marina looked like a parking lot for miniature spaceships. So why did it vanish? Blame physics and changing tastes. Those dramatic fins created extra windage, and as hull designs improved, everyone realized deep V's rode better in chop. By the mid-60s, the fins were gone, replaced with sleeker, faster lines. Today's Sea Flights are collector's gold, if you can find one that hasn't been modernized by an owner with a questionable taste in upholstery. But no matter how fast boats get now, none will ever have the audacity to combine hydrodynamics with pure 1950s sci-fi drama quite like this. Before we move on, hit that like button if you're already enjoying this trip down memory lane, and stick around because later in this list we've got a small boat style that could run over 100 miles an hour straight from the factory, and it's one you'll almost never see on the water today. From the late 60s through the 80s, the tri-hull bow rider was the undisputed first boat for half of North America. You've probably seen one, a stubby little speedboat with a flat, extra-wide bow that looked like it was trying to impersonate a landing craft. That cathedral shape came from 3 hull sections, a center V and 2 outer sponsons. The sales pitch was genius, stable enough for the kids, roomy up front for fishing, and cheap to build because the mold was basically a giant ice cream scoop. Brands like Glastron, Starcraft, and Boston Whaler cranked them out, and marinas couldn't keep them in stock. On a calm lake, they were perfect, but in choppy water, let's just say your dentist probably still remembers the fillings you cracked. The tri-hull's broad bow would smack each wave like a frying pan, soaking the front passengers and testing the limits of human vertebrae. By the 90s, deep V hulls had stolen the spotlight. They sliced through waves, rode softer, and looked sleeker. Boston Whaler even phased out its classic tri-hulls after 1996, moving to more conventional deep V shapes. Families still wanted stability, but they also wanted comfort, speed, and better fuel efficiency. These days, you might find a dusty tri-hull hiding under a tarp in someone's yard, waiting for a $500 Facebook Marketplace listing. But as a modern production style, gone. The short tri-hull lived fast, sold cheap, and left behind thousands of sun-faded hulls as souvenirs of its reign. If the Glastron Sea Flight was all about style, HydroStream was pure speed. Founded in 1968 by Howard Pipcorn, HydroStream cranked out some of the fastest small fiberglass boats you could buy in the 70s and 80s. Models like the Viper, Vector, and Vulture were light, mean, and shaped like they'd been carved by a drag racer with a grudge. The secret? A pad V hull, basically a V-bottom with a flat strip down the center. At speed, the boat rode on that tiny pad, reducing drag and letting you hit insane numbers with a big outboard. Throw in balsa core construction, and you had a family boat that could outrun half the local race fleet. on Saturday, then pull the kids on a ski tube Sunday. But here's the catch. Balsa core is light, but it's also about as waterproof as a sponge. Any water intrusion and rot set in like a slow-motion disaster movie. Plenty of owners ignored the warning signs until their boat's floor flexed like a trampoline. HydroStream's US factory closed in 1991, and the Canadian operation shut down in 1994. By then, liability insurance, stricter safety regs, and changing tastes had made ultra-light hot rods a tougher sell. Today, surviving streams are collector's items. Restored ones are blindingly fast and gorgeous, but don't buy a cheap project without checking the core, and you might end up with the fastest sinking boat on the lake. They were legends, but legends that demanded constant respect and a very dry garage. In the 1960s, Bob and Dave Switzer decided regular speedboats just weren't exciting enough. Their answer was the Switzer Wing, the boat that looked like a cross between a catamaran and a fighter jet. Instead of a single hull, it had two narrow sponsons joined by a bridge deck, creating a surface that actually generated lift at high speed. The Wing wasn't just a wild idea, it proved itself in racing, setting speed records and turning heads at every regatta. Twin outboards hung off the back, screaming at full throttle while the hull skimmed across the water like it was trying to take off. Crowds loved it, racers feared it, and magazines called it the future of boating. The problem was that the future came with a price tag and a steep learning curve. The Wing was expensive to build and tricky to master. As tunnel boat technology improved, other designs gave similar speed with more forgiving handling. Racers and consumers shifted toward centerpod and mod VP hulls that were easier to rig, easier to launch, and more comfortable in everyday conditions. Production of the original Wing stopped, and today they are rare collector pieces. Seeing one run is like watching a dinosaur sprint past you in a parking lot. They belong to a time when boat builders pushed boundaries simply because they could, and when performance mattered more than practicality. For pure spectacle, few boats before or since have matched the Switzer Wing. In the late 1960s, Sidewinder boats dropped a 16-foot deep V that became one of the most copied small speedboat hulls in history. It sat low in the water, had a long curved foredeck that looked like a banana laid upside down, and came in metal flake colors loud enough to make a bass fisherman squint. It was sleek, fast, and had a stance that made even casual lake-goers nod in approval. The design worked so well that other builders couldn't resist borrowing it. Some copies were near identical, right down to the deck lines. Sidewinder eventually took a few of these companies to federal court, and the lawsuits became almost as famous as the boat itself. The hull was that influential. Owners loved the Sidewinder for its mix of speed and style. With the right outboard, it could run with the big boys, but still felt manageable for weekend cruising. You could ski behind it, pull up to the dock looking like a movie star, and head home with a sunburn and a grin. The style began to fade in the 1980s as buyers wanted more freeboard for safety, more seating for friends, and better handling in choppy water. Sidewinder changed hands a few times before disappearing altogether, and with it went the original low-profile banana deck look. Today you'll find restored examples at vintage boat meets, glitter paint still shining. They remain a reminder of a time when hull design could make you famous and get you sued in the same year. Before we hit number 6, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our deep dives into boating history. And stick with me, because coming up is a 1970s late hot rod that packed a full car V8 under the engine hatch and could throw a rooster tail taller than your garage. In the mid-1970s, Glastron teamed up with designer Art Carlson to create the CV Series, and the result was some of the most eye-catching small performance boats of the decade. The CV16 and CV21 were closed-deck, low-profile runabouts with sharply raked foredecks and bold metal flake gel coat that practically shouted across the lake. These boats weren't just for show. Rigged with healthy outboards or stern drives, they delivered impressive top speeds for their size, and handled with precision that made them favorites among weekend racers and style-conscious boaters alike. The combination of automotive-inspired lines, deep bucket seats, and a sleek silhouette made the CV Series instant conversation starters at any dock. But by the late 1980s, the market was shifting. Buyers wanted more versatile layouts, open bows, and higher freeboard for safety. the closed-deck CV models gradually disappeared from Glastron's lineup, replaced by more family-friendly designs. Today, well-restored CV16s and CV21s are prized collector pieces, and their shimmering metal flake finishes still turn heads just like they did in their heyday. They remain a pure snapshot of an era when small speedboats were as much about making an entrance as they were about performance. In the 1970s, someone had the bright idea to take a car's big block V8, bolt it into a small fiberglass hull, and replace the propeller with a jet pump. The result was the Mini Jet Day Cruiser, a 16 to 20-foot rocket that could turn a quiet lake into a noise complaint. Brands like Tahiti, Sleek Craft, and Glastron all built them, often dripping in metal flake paint and fitted with deep wraparound seating for a few friends. The heart of the beast was usually a Barclay jet drive paired to a Ford 460, Chevy 454, or Chrysler 440. The acceleration was brutal. Stab the throttle and the boat leapt forward like it had just been rear-ended by a freight train. Top speed wasn't always the selling point. The joy was in blasting across the water at mid-throttle with a rooster tail big enough to wash someone's dock furniture onto their lawn. So why did they fade out? Jet drives in small boats burn fuel like it's on sale, and their efficiency at cruising speeds can't match a propeller. Buyers also wanted more practical layouts with higher freeboard, more storage, and quieter rides. By the late 1980s, most fiberglass jet mini day cruisers were gone from catalogs. Today, restored examples are collector toys. They still show up at nostalgia events, sounding like a drag strip on water. They are loud, thirsty, and unapologetically over the top. In their prime, they were the fastest way to combine hot rod culture with lake life. In the mid to early 1970s, one of the coolest things you could own was a small, closed-deck outboard sport boat. These little rockets, usually between 14 and 16 feet long, were all about speed, style, and squeezing as much fun as possible into a compact package. The most famous example, the Glastron GT150, which became a movie star in 1973 when it leapt a Louisiana causeway in the James Bond film Live and Let Die. The formula was simple. Take a sleek, low-profile hull, add a small windshield, and bolt on the biggest outboard the transom could handle. These boats were fast enough to thrill, light enough to tow with almost anything, and affordable enough that young buyers could actually get into the game. They were perfect for glassy lakes and sunny days, but they came with trade-offs. The low freeboard meant you had to watch your weight distribution carefully, and in rough waters they could turn into splash machines. Families eventually started asking for more seating, more safety, and more comfort, which led the market toward open bow designs. By the late 1980s, the closed-deck runabout under 16 feet had all but disappeared from dealer catalogs. Today, survivors are highly collectible, especially movie-famous models like the GT150. Restored, they are conversation starters and attention magnets at the dock. They may not be the most practical boats ever built, but when you're behind the wheel, they make you feel like the hero in your own chase scene. In the 1980s, tunnel boat racing was booming, and one class in particular, Mod VP, was shaping the luck of small performance boats everywhere. Mod VP stood for Modified V Production, and combined the speed of a tunnel hull with the stability of a centerpod. Builders like Stoker, Laser, STV, Eliminator, and Sleek Craft saw an opportunity to take that race-proven design and make it family-friendly. The result was the Mod VP Sport Tunnel, a boat you could tow to the lake, take the kids skiing in the morning, and then run triple-digit speeds in the afternoon if you had the right outboard. Stable at high speed and looked like nothing else at the ramp. The aerodynamic deck shapes and low windshields screamed performance. And they weren't just for show either. The design let the hull ride on a cushion of air trapped between the sponsons, reducing drag and giving them a smooth, fast feel. For a few golden years, the style was everywhere in performance boating magazines. The decline came when racing classes changed, outboards got heavier, and production costs rose. Buyers leaned toward larger offshore-style boats or more versatile deep V-hulls. The once common Mod MVP Sport Tunnel faded from mainstream catalogs, living on only with boutique builders. Today, they're sought after by enthusiasts who appreciate their mix of speed, handling, and pure 1980s attitude. Spot one running flat out on a calm lake, and you'll understand why these boats left such a lasting impression. Before jet skis, before wake boats, before fiberglass ruled the lake, there was the humble 3-point hydroplane. Often called sea fleas, these tiny wooden rockets were usually built from mail-order plans or sold as kits from names like Hal Kelly or Glenn L. The design was simple but brilliant. 2 forward sponsons to lift the front and a flat rear pad to skim the water, with a small outboard clamped to the transom. Sometimes as little as 10 or 15 horsepower, they could fly across a calm lake at speeds that felt like 100 miles an hour when you were sitting inches above the surface. They were cheap to build, easy to store, and offered more thrills per dollar than just about anything else on the water in the 1950s and 60s. The catch? They weren't exactly forgiving. At high speeds, the short wheelbase and flat running surface could make them twitchy, and a sudden gust or wake could launch you into an unexpected swim. Safety standards were looser back then, and helmets were more of a suggestion than a rule. By the late 1970s, liability concerns, changing tastes, and the arrival of personal watercraft pushed the Sea Flea out of the mainstream. Today, they survive in vintage racing clubs and backyard restoration projects, still capable of delivering that raw, grinning, wind-in-your-face excitement. They may be small, but they're a reminder that you don't need a giant engine or a big budget to feel like you're flying over water, just a little plywood and courage. And that's our trip through 10 small boat styles you just can't buy new anymore. From glittering wedge decks to low-profile hot rods and backyard-built hydros, these designs captured their eras in fiberglass, plywood, and a whole lot of attitude. Some faded because tastes changed. Others disappeared because new technology made them obsolete. But all of them left a mark on boating history that still turns heads at the ramp today. If you've ever owned one of these classics, or still have one tucked away under a tarp, tell us about it in the comments. What was your favorite memory, and which one would you bring back if you could? If you enjoyed this ride through boating's wilder side, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more stories from the water's past, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. Because there are still plenty of forgotten designs out there waiting for their comeback moment.